Something really strange is happening in Japan. There are literally millions of homes just sitting empty. They're not for rent, they're not for sale, they're just vacant. These so-called ghost houses are known as akiya, and they've become one of the biggest challenges the country is facing. So what in the world is going on here? Let's break it down.
Just look at this picture. This isn't just some old rundown building. It's a real-life akiya, and it's a symptom of a much, much bigger problem. These houses can be anything from a perfectly preserved home to a collapsing wreck like this one, and that poses a real danger to the whole neighborhood. Okay, let's talk about the scale of this thing, because it is staggering. According to the Japanese government, there are at least, get this, 3.18 million of these abandoned homes. And here's the wildest part. That number doesn't even count vacation homes or places that are actually for sale or for rent. This is a huge, mysterious other category.
And to really put that in perspective, check out this chart. Of all the empty homes in Japan, sure, more than half are for rent, but look at that huge slice of the pie labeled Other. That's almost 40%. That's them. Those are the akiya we're talking about. It's this enormous, undefined part of the housing market that the government is now scrambling to get a handle on.
All right, so here's what we're going to cover. We'll start with the sheer scale of the problem. Then we'll dive into the government's master plan and how they're paying for it. After that, we'll look at the incentives they're using, how this whole thing plays out in different kinds of neighborhoods, and finally, what could be next for the akiya crisis. All right, first up, the government's master plan. For years, this problem was kind of bubbling under the surface. But then, around the mid-2010s, the Japanese government had a major wake-up call and decided to create a national plan to finally deal with all these empty houses. And this right here, this was the turning point. This law in 2015 was a total game changer. For the very first time, it gave local towns and cities the actual power to step in. They could now go out, investigate these homes, find the owners, and, most importantly, label the really dangerous ones as specified vacant houses, which gave them the green light to take real action. Okay, so you've got a plan, but how do you pay for it, right? A plan is one thing, but action costs money. Well, the government's whole strategy really comes down to two main financial paths, either demolition or rebirth. So they came up with these two options for a problem home. The first is demolition, for the houses that are just too far gone to be saved. The other path is called utilization, which is all about renovating these buildings and giving them a new life, a new purpose in the community. And the best part? The government is willing to heavily subsidize both. And wow, does this picture tell the story of demolition? On the left, you've got this hazardous, crumbling building. It's just an eyesore, frankly. And then, boom! On the right, that same exact spot has been totally transformed into a clean, safe, and useful community space. It's an incredible change. So how do you convince an owner to tear down their property? Well, here's the really clever part. The government basically says, look, we'll cover 80% of the cost. The national and local governments each pitch in 40%, and that leaves the owner with just a 20% bill. Suddenly, a really tough decision becomes a whole lot easier. Now, what about the houses that can be saved? That's where utilization comes in. This is so cool. You see this neglected old house on the left, but it's got good bones. And then you see what it becomes, a beautiful facility for tourists. Instead of just removing a problem, this strategy actually adds a new asset to the neighborhood. And the financial deal for this is just as good. The costs are basically split into perfect thirds. The owner pays a third, the local government pays a third, and the national government pays the final third. It's a true partnership, and it really encourages people to invest in giving these old homes a second chance. All right, next up, carrots, sticks, and markets. Because, let's be honest, subsidies are great, but they're not the whole story. To really get people to act, you need a mix of pressure, rewards, and a marketplace that actually works. And this is that classic carrot and stick approach. The stick is a pretty serious tax penalty. See, land with a house on it usually gets a big tax discount. But if your akiya gets flagged as hazardous, you lose that discount. Your tax bill could shoot up by 6 times. Ouch! But then there's the carrot, a very nice tax break if you just agree to sell the property. And believe me, this carrot is very tempting. If you inherit a vacant house and you decide to sell it, you can get a special tax deduction of up to 30 million yen. We're talking about over 200,000 US dollars. That's a massive incentive to get these unwanted inherited houses back on the market. But of course, none of this works if people can't find these houses, right?
So the government helped create something called the National Akia Bank. You could just think of it like a Zillow or a Redfin, but it's exclusively for Japan's empty homes. It makes it way easier for buyers to connect with sellers all across the country.
Now, this next part is absolutely crucial to understand. Because here's the thing, an empty house in a Tokyo suburb is a totally different beast than an empty house in a remote, snowy village. The government gets this, and they've tailored their strategies for different regions. You can really break down the challenges into three main types of places. First, you have your aging suburbs. Second, you've got the super dense older parts of big cities. And third, there are the rural areas, especially snowy ones, that are dealing with massive population loss.
So first, in the suburbs, a lot of the homes are actually in pretty good shape. The problem is that the communities themselves are aging. Services like bus routes are being cut, and young families just aren't moving in. So the focus here is on creative reuse, like turning empty houses into group homes for the elderly. Okay, now let's go into the heart of the city. Here, the problem is all about space, or the lack of it. You've got these tiny, narrow lots all crammed together, which creates a huge fire hazard. You can't just fix one house. The only real solution is a coordinated effort to redevelop entire blocks at a time.
And finally, out in the countryside, the Akia problem is really just one piece of a much bigger story: depopulation. People are leaving, and the houses they leave behind are literally being crushed by snow. So the solution can't just be about houses. It has to be part of a bigger plan to save the entire region's economy.
So, after all that, where does this leave us? We've seen how Japan is tackling this incredibly complex puzzle head-on. But the question is this just Japan's problem, or is it a blueprint for the future? When you boil it all down, Japan's strategy is this really smart four-part playbook. First, they provide generous subsidies to make it affordable to either tear down or fix up a house. Second, they use taxes as both a stick and a carrot to get owners to act. Third, they built a modern marketplace so people can actually find these places. And fourth, and this is key, they recognize that one size does not fit all. This comprehensive and flexible approach is what makes it so interesting.
And that brings us to the big, final question that goes way beyond Japan. We know Japan is at the forefront of a global trend: aging and shrinking populations. So is there a struggle with millions of ghost houses just a scary warning for the rest of us about what's to come? Or is their proactive, multifaceted plan actually a roadmap that other countries might soon need to follow?